handout that we have prepared. The handout, we did our best to sort of take a look at your agenda and fashion our remarks within those parameters. But we'll discuss the logistics of the bonding process. That's actually, I think, the first page of the handout. It's what I call our Schoolhouse Rock graphic, and Representative Millett last session really enjoyed this piece of information, so we wanted to bring it back to you. And the last pages of the handout are also related to sort of the internal process of the bonding process. The middle of the handout provides extensive information about our general obligation debt profile, including per fiscal year, the size of past packages. And also, we also address some general market trends within the handout as well. And we will be happy to provide you really this key information as you deliberate this session on any matter, but especially on the question of whether or not to craft a general obligation bond package and of what size. I'm not flippant when I say that the most appropriate amount of general obligation, sometimes we say geo bonding, it's simply the amount that the state is willing to pay for in the line item that you will address this session in the general obligation debt service line. But there are really more helpful guidelines. One is the so-called 5% rule, and that is that the general fund debt service line in a given fiscal year should not exceed 5% of the total general fund, highway fund, and revenue sharing appropriation. That's something that appears when voters go to vote on these bond packages. We provide that information in the treasurer's statement. Right now, we think about the vote last July, which is a bit off cycle, but the last bond vote during the primary vote in July 2020. We calculate that general fund debt service percentage to be just south of, just less than 3%. We're often asked about where Maine stands compared to other states when it comes to our total debt profile, and the information that we consult the most, it comes from Moody's, one of the two credit rating agencies that we engage, that we pay money to tell us what they think of us every year before the bond sale. And it's really up to you as the policymakers to how much weight you assign to these rankings, how meaningful they are. But the most recent sort of validated report using audited numbers was released in May of 2020 using 2019 figures. And if you take a look at those ratings with regard to our total net tax supported debt profile, that includes things beyond just general obligation debt. Maine does well. In my opinion, we are just below the median when it comes to net tax supported debt per capita, as well as a percentage of personal income. If you just think dollar per dollar state debt, and that may or may not be a helpful ranking because you figure we're being compared to California and New York and Massachusetts, but we are 40th among the states when it comes to that total dollar size. And we actually are just at the median when it comes to tax supported debt as a percentage of GDP. You may recall that our credit rating was affirmed, essentially a AA stable credit rating was affirmed last May during the pandemic. 7 states unfortunately saw a downgrade. Maine was not one of them. It's also important to know for the committee, and the deputy treasurer will show you this in our payment schedule, we pay our general obligation debt off in 10 years, and that's a bit unique. That's a very conservative, truncated schedule. Some states and other issuers, municipal issuers, whether it's states, cities, counties, universities, they take much longer, sometimes 20, sometimes 30 years. So as you do your work this session, simply know my general opinion, just my opinion, that our general obligation debt profile is prudent and adequate, and we are here as a resource as you deliberate the governor's proposed budget, and also if you craft any geo bond package this session. Before I turn this over to Deputy Treasurer Colpitts, and I'm also happy to answer some questions if it's of interest to you, just wanted to share some orienting principles about the figures we'll provide and how we sort of do our bond work. It's important to know that we only incur debt. We only actually go to market and sell bonds when a project is ready. We use the phrase shovel ready. You don't incur debt automatically by voting for a package in the committee or on the House or Senate floor or when the voters ratify the ballot box. We only incur the debt when we actually go to market. I wish it was this simple, but the size of a package you craft or voters approve, it doesn't necessarily match a sale size, and the same is true for the debt service figure that you vote in. So Deputy Treasurer Colpitz will illustrate that in his presentation. Before I hand it over to him, I'm happy to answer any questions from the committee.
Any questions? Not seeing anything now.
Thank you.
Great. Well, good afternoon, everybody. As the treasurer had said, I'm Matthew Colpitz. I'm the Deputy State Treasurer. I've been in this position for about 3 years now, and I've had a few sales in front of me to help perform this presentation to you. So I will. I'm going to share my screen if that's okay. Reserve in person. We'll figure out how to do this here. Share this. And if I'm looking not at the camera, it's because I have two screens here, and I'm doing my best to do a couple different things at the same time. All right, can everybody see the screen?
I believe so.
Okay, perfect. So I wanted to orient you with the last comments that the treasurer had made regarding the authorized but unissued bonds versus the issued bonds. As you go through the appropriations process, you're going to be looking at two different things. They're going to sound very related, but they're two very different things. There's reviewing the general obligation debt proposals, and so new bonds that are coming to you for review. And then there's also going to be the debt service budget, which you're going to be reviewing.
Excuse me for a minute.
Sure.
Matt, can you enlarge that document on your screen?
There, how's that?
Thank you.
Much better, thank you.
Okay, perfect. You would think after a year of work from home, I would have this down by now. All right. So if you notice this column here, the authorized column, these are the new bonds that have historically been added to the authorized but unissued list, which are the ones that go through the legislature. They're passed with 2/3 vote and signed into law by the governor, ratified by the voters. You'll see this number is very different than the issued or consumed column right here. And it's because it doesn't take, it's not the same year that these are authorized that they're sold, as the treasurer was saying. And so you see last year we authorized $105 million worth of new bonds, but we issued $141 million. And that's because in the last several years, we've had some larger issue or some larger authorizations. So we've had $200 million in 2019, 105 in 2018, and so forth. And so these are just the bonds that were approved then being sold. And you can see just the historical, you know, this is not astronomical levels compared to historical, but in the issued levels, you can see historical. I'll help you walk you through this. So hopefully this lays a guideline of what we're looking at as we go through this presentation. The first step is your job is to review all of the proposed general obligation debt proposals. And so this is as rudimentary as it gets and as simple as I can make this. And it's even simpler than it looks. You are going to review each general obligation law, and as it gets passed through the legislature. As I mentioned before, it does require 2/3 to pass and signed into law and passed and ratified by the voters. It then becomes an official authorized but unissued bond. And so, as I mentioned before in the previous slide, there's currently 184 of authorized but unissued in the current debt profile. Once the bonds are passed, when it's in that list, the Treasurer's Office works with the governor and the administration on determining a cash flow schedule. When do the actual projects need the funds? It's generally over. They have 5 years after a bond is passed to sell the bonds, with the option to renew for another 2 years. 2 years after it gets matures, if you will. And so what we do is we work every single year on the cash flow, and I'll show you an exact example of how we do it on a later slide. And the bonds that need to be funded in a certain year, we go through the treasurer, and then they go through the governor to sign a financial order, which moves into when do we need the funds. And so we'll have the governor sign a financial order for Q1, for Q2, Q3, Q4. to make sure that the funds are available. What we as a treasurer's office need to decide is the best way to fund these different cash flow projects. There's two different ways we can do this. We can do internal borrowing, which is where we take the cash pool, and so we borrow against the own cash pool at the rate of the cash pool rate, which is generally much cheaper than doing the alternative route, which is called issuing a bond anticipation note. A bond anticipation note is essentially a very short-term debt, which is going to be repaid with the actual bond issue in June. It's generally a little bit more expensive, and it's used when you don't have the cash flow to cover the differences. And so for the last, I want to say 2006, it's not an official number, but I can certainly get that to you. That was the last time we've actually issued a ban. We've had a strong cash flow position. We've been able to borrow internally to cover all of our cash flow needs throughout the year. So this turns into the actual bond sale. Once we know exactly how much we need for the bond sale, which happens in June every year, we take what we had already borrowed from short-term borrowing, plus what they will need in the next quarter, and that's going to be our total bond sale. Now, while we get ready to go to the bond sale, there are several different pieces that have to happen. There's an official statement, which is the financial health as written by the state, which is then posted to the investment community so that they can have an updated view of the current state's fiscal position. In addition, we have rating agencies meetings, and so you've probably heard of S&P, Moody's, Fitch, and Kroll even. We work with currently S&P Moody's to provide us a rating. We're currently AA2 and AA stable, which are very good ratings for our size state. And that leads into the actual sale, and generally your sale price. You will sell bonds at a certain rate is dependent upon your rating. Among different things include certain supply demands, and so the more folks who want your bonds, the cheaper you can sell them essentially. So if you look at our overall current profile, this is our current general obligation debt as of June 30th. You can see we have $572 million of principal, $118 million of interest, total debt service of $691 million. This is just a nice way of looking at it. As the treasurer had mentioned, we only do 10-year debt, which is advantageous for several different reasons. One, it means that we have a shorter time that we have to pay off our debt. It's going to be cheaper for the state. And when investors look at our debt profile, the likelihood that we'll default over the next 10 years is much less likely than over the next 30 years. And so this is it's a very rapid amortization schedule. Let's talk about the current market. Everybody's probably heard this in the news at some point, talking about how the market is at record lows. You can see this light blue line right here. This is what we call the AAA MMD yield curve. This is what we use for the benchmark. This is a benchmark of all of the AAA rated municipalities. What are they getting for rates right now? So you can see on the shorter end, it's very, very low. And on the long run on 30, it's still very low, but it's about less than 1.5%. Remember, we only issue 10-year debt, so really we're only looking from about this point, the 10-year point, to the left. Now, you may remember I said we were AA rated, which means that we're not going to get the same yield that a AAA rated would. And the difference of what we get versus a AAA is called the credit spread. That's generally given in basis points. So 1 basis point is 0.01%. And this is as of January 8th. You can see that the average spread is about 20 basis points, so 0.20% for AA to AAA, which is a decent spread, and not to brag on the state, but we generally do much better than the 20 basis points. And so today, to give you an idea of where the market is, a 5-year AAA bond is, I think, 27 basis points, so 0.27%, and a 10-year is 0.79%, which is absolutely astronomically low. It's a great time, and so if you even use the 20 basis points credit spread, we're looking at anywhere between 47 to 99 basis points for a rate. The sale last year in July, we had an all-in true interest cost of about 81 basis points, so 0.81%, which is very good, favorable rates for the state. Now, I didn't put a slide in here for the taxable, so this is for the tax exempt. Most of our sales include tax exempt bonds. There are taxable bonds that we do sell. The benchmark for those are U.S. Treasuries. And to give you an idea, those are a bit higher these days. The last week or so, that has actually increased. The 10-year U.S. Treasury is about 1.10%. So you figure we're probably going to be about 1.5% on the taxable side. And I must disclose that this is, of course, just a picture, a sort of a screenshot in history. When we go to market in June, this may or may not be anywhere close to what it actually is. Your guess is as good as mine, but this is just a current snapshot of where we are. The Treasurer does have the ability to go to market at any point in time in the year. We've historically chosen June as it seems to be a good point for our size sale. There's plenty of demand for our bonds, and the supply is a little bit lower. So it seems to be advantageous to us. And at this point, we still intend to go to June this year. This is the disclosure, as you will all, of course, read. So now we're going to talk shifting over to the budget side. And so we've talked a little bit about the process for approving authorized bonds, but unissued. I'm going to talk a little bit about now how do we form sort of the budget with the administration for debt service. And this is a screenshot, or this is a PDF of a spreadsheet that we use to determine cash flow needs for each bond. So you'll see here on these different columns, you'll see columns A through H. You'll see under column A, authorized but unissued, after June 19th. So that was our last bond sale. You see we had $65 million of unauthorized, or authorized but unissued. And in July, $120 million was additionally authorized, which gave us a total of 184. And then you see the cash flow needs. And so Department of Transportation, for example, had a new $90 million bond authorized. They're actually going to be able to sell all $90 million in June because of the cash flow needs. They've already received $30 million in Q1, $30 million in Q2, and they're likely going to be receiving $30 million in Q4. There may be some, though, who don't expend all their newly authorized bonds. An example would be another DOT bond, which is the ports, harbors, marine transport, etc. They had $15 million newly authorized, and they're not going to be selling any of that in this bond sale. But they are going to be selling $15 million of a bond that was authorized in 2019. And so you see, if the bonds that are authorized by the voters are not the same as the bonds that are sold every year. So if you go through that, this is our cash flow needs. This is the actual bond sale. Right now, we're looking at about a $128 million sale. This will become more clear over the next few months. Generally around April or so, we have a more definitive number here to help get a better idea. And so when we go to the budget, we have a realistic number to use. We generally propose, you'll see in FY21 and FY22, a more conservative rate than it actually is. And there's a few reasons for that. But let me show you what will happen for fiscal year 20 to sort of help you walk through the budget for debt service. The bond issue is $114 million or $115 million. And if you notice, for those math sleuths, you'll notice that on the actual authorized spreadsheet on the very first page, that's significantly lower than what was actually sold. We sold $141 million of authorized but unissued. The reason for that is that we sell our bonds at what's called a premium. And so the investors are going to give us $141 million, which was the total authorized general obligation debt. They're going to give us $114 million worth of bonds. And so they're going to give us $141 million of cash. And they're only going to get $114 million worth of bonds because of a premium, which is essentially where they're going to buy up the rate. And so the rate is going to be advantageous to them. But the good news for us is that draws down our total all-in true interest cost. And so you can see that our rate is significantly better than the 4%. And so that's how FY20 looks. We also utilize carry forward if you authorize us to, of course. So the current budget is based off of simply using the baseline. So $113 million is the baseline. Because of carry forward and the advantageous rates and savings, we can generally carry those forward and not need additional appropriations. So you see we have $150 million at 4%. We generally use a conservative number here. As many of you are aware, general obligation debt is one of those items that you never want to be short on because it is one of the few items in the Constitution that is required to be paid regardless of whether we appropriate funds or not. And so it's of course a smart idea to appropriate conservatively. So you'll see that we have $150 million both FY21, 22, and 23. You'll see some other costs that we have built in. We do build in some ban or cash pool borrowing to help pay for the cash flow borrowing. As you can see, it cost the state $499,000 to borrow the cash flow for the 12 months, which is just from the cash pool. And we're generally conservative there. We historically have budgeted for lines of credit or for tax anticipation notes for cash flow borrowing needs in case the tax receipts weren't quite up to par. We have not had to issue a TAN in quite some time. And with the position of the cash pool, we feel very comfortable without actually utilizing anything. And so that's going to be carried forward as well. So that's a general picture of the debt service budget side, and also the general obligation side of the house. And I'll leave you actually on this main page. This is sort of where it all starts of what's authorized versus what's issued, and then a historical timeline for that. And so with that, I will open it up to questions, and I'll leave sharing while questions are asked, just in case I need to refer to something.
Thank you so much. Appreciate that. I'd encourage people to use their mechanism to raise their hand. Oh, I see Senator Breen is raising hers just on the screen and clapping, which is excellent. Senator Breen, Chair Breen.
I'm so good at this. I just wanted to clap for the treasurer's office, really.
Yeah,
that's what that was all about. I just want to make a comment to my fellow committee members. There's no test on this. Okay, this is the first time you're getting this information. It's very technical. This is the beginning of trying to understand these things. So I don't want folks to feel panicked or overwhelmed by this information, even though the treasurer's office has put it out there in a very user-friendly way. It's just, we will be discussing these things again. They will be back when we take up bond proposals and that sort of thing. So I just wanted to remind everybody of that. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Certainly. And so Representative Hymanson.
Thanks. Just two quick questions. Thank you for that overview. Does transportation bonds, do they usually get sold the June after the November vote? Is that usually the cycle?
Generally, yes, correct.
Okay. As opposed to other ones that will take the 5 years to.
Correct, and it's all about being shovel ready, as they say in the business, yeah. And so they're much more capable of getting the money to work than somebody such as the broadband, who have to create programs in order to get the money to work, and so they're much more capable of getting that quickly. Okay,
and are any states AAA bonded?
Oh, of course, absolutely. There are several. There's been
Utah, I think out west and.
Correct.
Still.
Yeah. Okay. Curious. That's all. Thanks.
Any other questions? I don't see anyone else with their hand up or frantically waving to me. I want to reiterate what my co-chair said, that this is just the first process in these slides. I remember these from last year. I found them very useful, but certainly the department and the treasurer are at our disposal anytime we might want to have a further or more in-depth discussion at the committee level or even individually. I'm sure they'd be more than welcome to address any thoughts or concerns that people have. So without seeing any other questions, I thank you for coming and sharing the slides and giving us such a great overview. I'm sure we'll have multiple conversations during the course of our work going forward. So thank you, Treasurer Beck, and thank you, Deputy Treasurer Colpitts. Appreciate you being here so much.
Thank you.
Feel free to stay on if you'd like to listen to the rest of our agenda. Happy to have you. So with that, I think we'll go to an overview of the Land for Maine Futures program and the organization, the history of the funding and sources of revenue, etc. We have with us today Sarah Deemers, the director of LMFs from the Department of Agriculture, Conservation, and Forestry. So I will turn it over to Commissioner Demers? No.
Nope, that would be director of the Land for Maine Future program.
My bad. I didn't read I was well prepared. I should have known that. Thank you so much for being here. Appreciate it. And again, if people have questions, please raise your hand or just signal to me. So thanks.
Great. Well, thank you all so much for asking me to be here today to talk about the Land for Maine's Future program. We're going to do a fairly high-level review of the program, our accomplishments, our funding, and I'm more than happy to answer questions after the presentation, during the presentation, or at any time in the future when you may have a question. I am going to share my screen and run through a PowerPoint presentation. Hopefully you got those slides in advance. And I just ask you to bear with me. I am not as proficient in Zoom as I am with Teams, so hang in there with me as I transition to the PowerPoint slide. Okay, folks should be able to see that screen. Great. So as I said, my name's Sarah Demers. I'm the director of the Land for Maine's Future program, and I've been the director for, I was trying to think in my head, either the last 5 or 6 years I've been with the program. The Land for Maine's Future Fund was suggested in 1986 by the Governor's Special Commission on Outdoor Recreation, and was then established in 1987 when voters approved the first $35 million bond to establish the program. And I would just add that for the vast majority of funds that have come into the Land for Maine's Future program, they have been bonds. There was one single general fund appropriation for the program, but the vast majority has been through bonding. And in the initial stages of the Land for Maine's Future program, funding was really only eligible to state agencies for acquisitions. And we have here some of our early investments include Shackford Head at the top, Dodge Point in the middle, and Mount Kineo here at the bottom. Those are all owned and managed by our Bureau of Parks and Lands. Funds are now available, however, for acquisition by municipalities and land trusts and other entities who have a mission of conservation. So those are what we call our cooperating entities. And as it says here, bond funds were used really for purchase of lands for statewide significance, and that was determined to be state held, to ensure public access to diverse outdoor recreation opportunities, and to protect scenic and natural environment. I'm not going to read the LMF enabling legislation, but I encourage you all to. I think I may be biased, but I think it's some of the best legislation ever written. It's actually quite poetic. As you read that, I'll just point out that we have some photos here kind of demonstrating a little bit of everything that we do. The top here, we have a couple of current LMF board members visiting some of our recent property recent protections. And it just a sense of, you know, we do work on everything from working waterfronts to farmland to wildlife habitat to recreation, working forests. We kind of cover the conservation gamut. And I will leave you with that legislation. I really do encourage you to take a look at it. As was mentioned, we are located within the Department of Agriculture, Conservation, and Forestry. Our program is a director and 2 full-time equivalents. We have a board that is appointed by the governor that includes 3 commissioners and 6 members of the public. I will note for any of you that may be part of confirming appointments that we do have 3 positions that are currently needing to be appointed. And those members must be selected for their knowledge of the state's natural resources, landscape, and their demonstrated commitment to land conservation. We encourage and enjoy having appointments from a broad geographic representation. It really helps keep the board tied on what's going on in all parts of the state. So the Land for Maine's Future program has worked on projects and participated in projects in all of Maine's 16 counties. And I'm more than happy after this, if you would like to know the projects in the area that you serve, just shoot me an email and we'd be happy to pull that together for you. On the map on the right depicts Okay, so dark green is all fee conservation land. So that's land that is owned outright by either the state or another organization for conservation purposes. The light green areas are conservation easements, and these large scale ones would be working forest easements. And then those areas in orange that you can see are where Land for Maine's future program has participated in conservation. So this map, though it's hard to read, does show in orange 62 water access sites, 42 farms, 27 commercial working waterfront properties, greater than 1,300 miles of shoreline covering rivers, lakes, ponds, and 60 miles of coastline, 158 miles of former railroad corridors, which were converted to multi-use trails, and greater than 617,000 acres of conservation and recreation lands. Nearly half of that is working farm and working forest easements. So how does the program work? LMF is a competitive grant program. We issue a call for proposals using the procurement RFP process. So we are consistent with state contracting through our process. The board publishes a workbook which outlines program requirements. It serves as the call for proposals and describes the board's funding priorities. Some of the key components of the Land for Maine's future program are that we will only participate in projects where we have a willing seller. So the landowner is required to submit a letter with the application indicating that they're aware an application is coming through and that they give their consent. They are not obligated at that point to sell their property. It's just an acknowledgement that they understand their property is being considered. The board requires that the purchase price be determined by an appraised value. That's actually in statute. That's a statutory requirement. Public access is required, and there's a small footnote there that public access is not required on working waterfront or farmland properties. We do try to advocate for public access when it's appropriate, but given food safety and just sort of the considerations of a commercial business, we do sometimes have to limit public access. Hunting, fishing, and trapping may not be prohibited, and that is a provision of the bond. I think the last 4 bonds have explicitly stated that. Municipal approval is required when property interests represent more than 1% of a municipality's state valuation. And in the instance of the LUPC jurisdiction, that's at the county level. We most often see this triggered in the LUPC jurisdiction. I can't recall ever having it occur in a municipality. And that's typically when we're looking at large working forest easements. We do have a very rigorous due diligence process intended to protect the state's investment. So we are really looking hard at title. We're looking very closely at the survey and the appraisal just to ensure that the state is getting what in fact believes it is getting. And we do work with publicly derived conservation priorities. The board undertakes a public process to define what priorities it's going to pursue with each call for proposals.
Director, can I stop you right there on that slide?
Absolutely.
Just remind me what LUPC stands for.
Sure, that's the Land Use Planning Commission. So that is the government jurisdiction for the northern portion of the state that does not have municipal divisions of government.
Thank you. And roughly, how many people are on that commission?
The LUPC, I should know that. I believe the LUPC is comprised of a 9-member board, but I'd want to confirm that for you.
Thank you.
Okay, so we will move to a review of the financial history of the Land for Maine's future program. This slide shows the different bonds that were authorized by voters. And my footnote is there was a bond in 1987. I just don't have all the data on it to display the same information. The second column shows the bond amount. This column is kind of a bit reminiscent of the previous presentation that was given by the Treasurer's Office, there's a difference between when the bond is authorized by voters and then when funds are sold. And then I'm actually showing here then when they're closed out. So you can see here's when they were deposited in the account for the Land for Maine's Future program. And then the final column depicts when those bond funds were closed out, so completely spent. And you can see we do have some balances right now in the 2009 bond and the 2011 bond, and I will talk about that in the next slides. Okay, so this is looking just specifically at the 2009 and 2011 bonds. Those are the bonds in which we do have cash available. The 2009 bond, again, was for 9.25 million. And that bond had specific allocations for funding. So the Land for Maine's Future program is comprised of multiple funding accounts. So we have the Land for Maine's Future Fund, we have the Water Access Fund, and we have the Working Waterfront Fund. And those funds are really just accounting subunits, and it is a way to separate money within the bond. The bond language itself said 6.5 million must go into the Land for Maine's Future Fund. 1 million must be made available for farmland protection. We do not currently have a farmland fund, so it is commingled, but it was allocated for specific use. And then 1.75 million is to go into the Working Waterfront Fund. And you can see on the far column, the cash balance that's remaining in those. For the Conservation and Recreation Fund, all of that cash balance is allocated to active projects. Excuse me, I'll go back. And with the Working Waterfront, that $6,000 is also will be applied to active projects. We have a little bit of money left lingering here in farmland preservation. And at this point, we do not have any active farmland funds. We have closed out all of those projects that have come in. So there's a little bit of question about what we're going to do with those funds at this point. And then if we come down here in the 2011 bond, again, this one bond was $5 million. We look back, we can see it was approved by voters in 2011. It wasn't sold until 2016. So there was quite a bit of lag there. And the 3 million plus balance there is also allocated toward active projects. And the next slide, we'll talk about a little bit about what those projects are. Bottom line is we have just under $4 million cash on hand, essentially. And of that 3.9 million, 2.9 is allocated toward 11 active projects. 4 of those come from the Land for Maine's Future Fund. You can see there's a little over 1 million allocated towards those projects, and they will leverage approximately $1.3 million in matching funds. And we'll talk more about matching funds in just a minute. We have 4 active Working Waterfront projects and 3 active water access projects. So Working Waterfront, when you think of a Working Waterfront project, that is the Spruce Head Fishermen's Co-op, or that is a municipally owned launch that is used by commercial fishermen, and there's a buying station and a refueling station. So these are very commercial places where boats will come to offload, refuel, buy ice, whatever it is that they're doing for that part of the ocean. And then when we talk about water access, we're talking about a boat launch where you can launch your boat recreationally to go cruising on a lake, or a water access site can also be stream bank fishing or a swimming hole, any opportunity that gets people to the water, generally not for commercial purposes. And that's been an extremely popular fund in the last year. The board has just recently allocated an additional $660,000 to that fund. You can see that on the slide. Really in recognition of just how busy our water access sites have been, particularly in the pandemic year. people are looking for opportunities to get in the water, to get on the water, to cool off in the summer months, and to just let off some steam in the winter months, whether it's ice skating, ice fishing, whatever it may be. These have been incredibly popular. And we anticipate that the $660,000 that is available for new grants will be allocated in the next 6 months. And then we will hold a very small portion of the bond funds available to cover state legal fees. We make small grants available to our applicants to improve access. And then we have some inventories that we're required by statute to do as well. Okay. So I want to just quickly go through the last slides to acknowledge that the Land for Maine's Future does have some strong economic contributions. LMF projects generate $3 of match for every $1 of LMF contribution. The bond requires us to match 1-to-1. We have consistently overmatched that by several margins. And it's also something that is often a misperception is that, you know, conservation lands are coming off the tax rolls. Maine land trusts have reported that more than 95% of the land that they conserve are on the tax rolls. And most of the remaining acres are making a payment in lieu of taxes, or a pilot payment. I think it's important to also note here, many of our applicants are municipalities. And so I wanted to just remind you that when the state or a municipality is acquiring land, yes, that land is coming off the tax rolls. But I think those municipalities have made that determination that that's an acceptable loss to them because of the public benefit that conservation land provides to their town. And of course, because so much of what we do is in the working landscape, whether it is working waterfronts, farmland, forest land, there are economic contributions made by the Land for Maine's Future towards those sectors as well. And as we look to the future, this is my wrap-up slide here. We'll be thinking about how the Land for Maine's Future program can be a strong partner in this administration's climate change initiatives. You know, how can we help to implement the desired outcomes from the climate change recommendations? The board is currently undertaking a review of conservation accomplishments. What have we accomplished in the last 30 years, and how does that compare to where our priorities may need to be for the future? We have a 30 by 30 initiative, which I hope will lead us to think about not just the quantity of conservation land that might be appropriate, but also the quality. We have a conservation task force set of recommendations that we'll be looking to incorporate into the program. And we have just recently convened a subcommittee that has provided some recommendations to the board on program policies and how the program is implemented. So that's my presentation. And let's see if I can figure out how to stop sharing.
Thank you, Director Demers. I appreciate it. Great slides. Happy to open this up to questions or comments by committee. Feel free to raise your hand or wave. Let me see if I can look at everyone. Yeah, there we go. So, Representative Hymanson, a question?
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for that. What happens to the cash on hand?
So our current cash on hand is 3.9 million. Of that 3.9 million, 2.9 is allocated towards active projects that are in the process of completing that very rigorous due diligence process that we have. And another 600,000 of that is available for new applications. So as new applications come in, those funds will be spent.
I guess what I mean is where is it kept and what happens to it as it's kept?
So it is kept in an account within the Department of Agriculture, Conservation and Forestry.
Okay, and it sits there as that number.
Yeah,
it doesn't
it's there.
Anything. There's no interest that accrues. No, it's not in any kind of no, it's just there.
Yep, it's just like any other general fund or dedicated fund or bond fund account within a state agency.
Okay, thanks. Another is the hunting rights. Is that also under local control? If there's some change to the, then that can change within.
Yes, so hunting and trapping is subject to state and local laws. So if a town or a city has a municipal firearms ordinance, that applies to that property as well.
Up to prohibition, it can't be prohibited.
If there is a firearms ordinance, it can be prohibited, except that we'd like to see that hunting can be provided by bow and arrow. So whether,
Oh,
you know.
okay, okay, thanks.
Is that all, Representative?
That's it, yeah.
Chair Breen?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Sarah, can you tell us a little bit about how the projects are rated? Meaning when there's an application process, there's criteria that the board has set, and there's a process where, you know, applications have to meet certain criteria. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so the board publishes all of their scoring criteria in that call for proposals. And when projects come in, they are all scored according to the criteria that are in their grant application. And we give them a whole format that matches up exactly with the scoring criteria. And the board does separate out and only compares projects of similar type with each other. So a project of statewide significance would only compete with a project of statewide significance. A project of local significance would only compete with a project of local significance. So they do stratify the projects and attempt to have a pretty broad geographic representation. And for sure, they're looking at sort of what are those projects that have multiple conservation values. That's language that has been used pretty consistently in the bond. Looking at projects that affect multiple communities or have multiple conservation values. So we're really looking for the biggest bang for our buck.
Any other questions, Chair, at this time? No. Representative Fay.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Actually, following up on that, do you have sort of potential project applications kind of stacked up and constantly in process, or is it more like we've got new funding and so now we're going to put out a call for projects?
Sort of a two-part answer. For the vast majority of our funds, we are issuing a call for proposals consistent with the state's RFP process, which is a very specific process with a lot of rules. So those are happening periodically as we have funds available. When we have a bond issue of maybe $5 million, like we did in the most recent bond, that's probably going to be one call for proposals. We get enough applications in that we would consume that $5 million. When we have a bond that's the size of, say, 10 or more million, that's going to be multiple calls for proposals. The one exception to that is our water access projects. Recognizing that waterfront properties are a hot commodity and limited availability here in Maine, we have made that program on a rolling basis. So we can accept proposals for water access funds at any time.
Thank you. Any other questions? Thoughts? Not seeing anyone. Well, thank you so much. Oh, Representative Hymanson, are you? I can't tell if you're raising your hand or, okay. You're muted though.
Raise my hand, unmute. Oh, and now I forgot what I was going to say. So there we go.
Well, you can always reach out at any
yeah,
time.
thanks. It was about the land trusts around here. Anyway, I'll think of it.
Thank you. Well, thank you so much for coming and doing the presentation. I know that we all received that via email, so we can look at it further if necessary. And I know that you'll always be available if we would like to have you come back to discuss anything specific. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Thanks. So that brings us to our third topic today, which is the Governor's Climate Council report. We're happy to have Director Hannah Pingree of the Governor's Office of Policy, Innovation, and the Future with us. Welcome, Director Pingree. Looking forward to having you give us some information about all the work that's being done over the last, I guess, 2 years. Would that be accurate? We can't hear you right now, and there's sort of a buzzing going on. Now you're muted. Nope, still a buzzing. We cannot hear you.
Madam Chair, can I do a little bit of framing of this while we?
That would be great while she troubleshoots her mute.
Obviously, folks have heard a lot in various forums about the Climate Council work, the recommendation. We've all gotten the full book. And that's not why I invited Director Pingree here. She's not going to do everything soup to nuts. I specifically asked her to come to help us understand how this project or multiple projects, what the various funding possibilities are, number one, and then also how it's going to cut across different policy areas. So we won't be hearing about it all at once, really, except for today. We'll be hearing probably bits and pieces of it through various policy committees and through various potential funding streams. So that was why I asked Director Pingree to come today, not to necessarily get into all the science and all of that, but more, how is this going to make its way through the legislature? So I just wanted to frame that for folks.
Thank you.
Can you hear me now?
Oh, we can. Excellent.
Okay, good. Honestly, just quitting and coming back is the golden solution. So I'm sorry that I missed Senator Breen's introduction. We did chat briefly, but to both you, to Chairwoman, you're doing an excellent job on Zoom, and thank you for inviting me here, and greetings to the whole Appropriations Committee. I am the Director of the Governor's Office of Policy, Innovation, and the Future, and also the co-chair of the Maine Climate Council. And I think, as Senator Breen said, I'm going to give you the quick overview of the Climate Council and its process, a little bit of a preview of some anticipated action this legislative session, and some, I would say, very brief understanding of some of the different components of the work. I think, as you will see when I talk about components of the plan, it really is broad and wide-ranging. It really impacts everything from broadband to transportation infrastructure to thinking about our future workforce. So I'm not going to get into all of the details, but I'll again try to provide you with an overview. So just going to start this slideshow. And you are seeing it, I'm assuming.
We are. Looks good.
Great. Okay, good. So I think as many of you have tuned in, and a few of you have already seen the presentation, so I'm sorry for some repetition, but this past December 1, the governor did release Maine Won't Wait, which is our 4-year plan for climate action. And I'm going to take you again through a little bit of the challenge of climate, not all of the science as Senator Breen suggested, but certainly some of the overview of the policy areas recommended in the plan. So the Maine Climate Council was a bill passed by the last legislature, LD 1679. We were grateful to receive support from this committee as it went through the appropriations process, overwhelming bipartisan support sponsored by Senator Woodson. And I would say that the kind of highest level portions of the law is to require the state to reduce our emissions by 45% by 2030 and at least 80% by 2050. It created the Maine Climate Council, which is now in statute, and it is an ongoing body with legislative representation, business community members, commissioners, lots of different stakeholder partners, and they are required every 4 years to produce a new plan. So the first plan was due by December 1, 2020, and again, that's sort of the highlights I'm going to walk through today. So again, I've talked briefly about the goals. The governor also signed an executive order last September to require the state to achieve carbon neutrality by 2045. And the Climate Council's plan, in addition to the emission reductions, is to ensure Maine people, our industries, communities, and people are resilient to the impacts of climate change. So just the quick, you could get these deep details through the DEP. Every 2 years produces a specific emissions report, but this is where Maine's emissions come from. 54% from transportation, approximately 30% from our buildings, residential and commercial, 9% from industry, and 7% from our electricity sector. So this kind of provides you a good roadmap of the challenges of reducing our emissions and where we need to do the most work. So where are we? The state had already had a goal in law from a previous iteration of climate planning in the early 2000s under the Baldacci administration to reduce our emissions at least 10% below 1990 levels by 2020. The most recent DEP emissions report shows us about 17.5% below those 1990 levels. So we are moving in the right direction. There are many states that are not, but obviously still have work to do to hit the 45% reduction goal by 2030. And just for comparison, the international Paris Climate Agreement that the US was a part of and most countries around the world have signed on to require a 28% reduction by 2025. So we are moving in the right direction to hit that. So the Climate Council, just a little bit more detail, it's a 39-member group. Under the Climate Council are two different subcommittees, the Science and Technical Subcommittee, which was incredibly important to our process, really providing data and science to advise the plan. A newly created Equity Subcommittee, which going forward is going to work in detail on implementation tasks and how we ensure equity in climate implementation. And then under that were these 6 working groups that really did a lot of heavy lifting. I know Senator Breen was on one of those groups, as well as many other legislators. Each of these groups had 30 to 50 people on them, lots of department representatives, but many community members, municipal representatives, youth representatives. So transportation, buildings, energy, where our 3 groups really focus on how do we reduce emissions. And then community resilience, coastal and marine, and natural and working lands. We're focused on how do we make our communities more resilient to the future impacts of climate change, sea level rise, increasing storm events. How do we maximize the ability for our forests and our farms to sequester more carbon? So we really tried to take a sort of broad perspective with lots of Maine people involved, but we also wanted to be driven by data and science. So the Maine Climate Council, with the help of some consultants, did several reports. They are all online at our website, climatecouncil.maine.gov, including these cost-benefit analyses, an equity assessment, which we worked with the University of Maine on, as well as a specific report on how we can leverage greater economic growth and job creation, implementing components of the climate plan. The Science and Technical Subcommittee did an incredible job. Again, had some help from the legislature, but produced a several 100-page report on the impacts of climate change and its effects on Maine. Again, it is online and a really helpful document. Lots of scientists from the major institutions around Maine contributed to that. I would say most significantly that the law required that committee to make a recommendation around sea level rise. The Department of Environmental Protection felt like we needed a science-based approach to future permitting and how do we start to account for sea level rise. And I posted here the specific recommendation of committing to manage for 1.5 feet of relative sea level rise by 2050. So the major 4 goals of the plan: reduce Maine's greenhouse gas emissions, make Maine more resilient to the impacts of climate change, foster economic opportunity and prosperity as we make progress on both of the first 2 bullets, and then how do we advance equity through Maine's climate response? How do we make sure that Maine's rural communities, Maine's low-income populations, and diverse communities are included in aspects of this plan? So there are 8 kind of buckets of action that when we got all the input back from the working groups, we put them into these categories. I'm going to walk through them quickly. I won't read to you all of the suggested solutions. They're in the climate plan online. We're actually going to try to deliver hard copies to your desks when you might return to them. We're also happy to send them to you at home. So, and again, it is available online. So I'm going to walk through these 8 strategies. Again, the first 3 are about how do we reduce our emissions, then how do we produce growth in our economy while we take action on climate, and then the next strategies are really about Maine's people and communities and how do we better prepare. So again, transportation really is the most significant area where we need to take action. It is also an area where the state as well as states around the country, it's sort of a burgeoning area as electric vehicles, hybrid vehicles, additional technologies come online. We have EVs certainly in Maine. It is a growing area. We are installing infrastructure, but really Detroit and the automakers are just really starting to bring new models on the market, including trucks, which is the most popular selling car in Maine. Certainly trucks are what's needed for my community and lots of communities that are rural. So how do we accelerate Maine's transition to electric and lower emission vehicles? How do we increase fuel efficiency and alternative vehicles and alternative fuels in the vehicles on the road? And then sort of big bucket of recommendation, how do we reduce vehicle miles traveled? This recommendation includes enhancing our broadband infrastructure, enhancing our public transportation systems around Maine, including creative rural options for people who require additional transportation options, as well as how do we plan our communities and land use to reduce the amount people have to drive to work, to school, to shop. So a lot of work in that last item. I won't go through all the things on buildings, but you can probably imagine transitioning our buildings to be more efficient, transitioning them to cleaner heating and cooling systems, advancing building codes, leading by example in public buildings, advancing climate-friendly building products, which really are, I would say, actually a huge economic opportunity for Maine. Things like wood fiber insulation, CLT, products that are better for the climate, but also really good for the Maine economy. I would say that the next is the work in our energy sector as we transition our heating systems and our transportation sector over time to be electrified. We need to continue to enhance and grow our clean energy supply. The past Maine legislature already took significant action. We have a requirement that 80% of Maine's energy come from clean sources by 2030. So now we need to make sure that we do all the important work that's needed to be done to get there in a way that is both cost effective and creates good paying jobs in Maine. So most of these strategies are around how do we do that in a way that makes sense. And then how do we also support our industrial sector and our large facilities that need creative solutions like efficient combined heat and power. I would highly encourage, when you have time, to read the report on strengthening Maine's clean energy economy. We see a lot of exciting opportunity in both clean energy, but also efficiency jobs. They are the fastest growing sector of job creation in the country, and New England is really leading. Maine has been a little slower than some of the other states, but we are seeing some exciting things happening on that in Maine. And then how do we also protect and grow jobs in areas like forest products, aquaculture, and farming, where we see both challenges because of a change in climate, but also opportunities based on some of our climate solutions. So the next couple strategies are really about working lands and our environment and our communities. So how do we protect, this is a good one to really follow up on LMF, how do we protect our natural working lands and waters? Maine is 90% forested, so keeping these natural lands working, you know, these trees are sequestering a lot of carbon for our region. So how do we develop incentives? We already have I would say a very willing partner in both our agriculture and forest product industry. So how do we really support these industries to do more? I would say this is an area that many legislators and municipalities will be are familiar with. Lots of our communities are seeking more assistance for local planning. So how do we as a state and how do communities better plan for increasing storm events, impacts on infrastructure, and rising sea levels? So major area of work on primarily supporting both local and regional planning, as well as this eventually gets into the need for significant infrastructure investment. So investing in climate ready infrastructure is something the state has already focused on with lots of good work around culverts, but the work around climate and improving and upgrading our state's infrastructure is extremely connected. So one of the recommendations in the climate plan is to establish a state infrastructure adaptation fund. And this is really to enhance further infrastructure funding. The state loses out on lots of opportunity to apply for FEMA grants, for example, and a recommendation that came out of a couple of the different working groups was a specific fund that would allow the state to help these projects to move forward. And lastly, I won't go into the detail, but obviously really helping Maine people understand the impacts of climate, to be transparent about the data, but obviously we have programs to help people weatherize their homes, to help people get incentives to buy electric cars. So really want to make sure that those are out there and available to all Maine people. So education and communications, we have a lot of businesses in Maine really across the state who are already doing fantastic work. And so how do we really hold them up and help tell that story? So I won't go through all of the detail. I will say that there are a number of different bills this legislative session coming from the governor and other legislators. I don't believe any of these bills will come to the Appropriations Committee. Most of them do not require additional funding, but they are the pieces of moving this forward. This is a 4-year plan. There are a lot of bills this legislative session on climate issues. I will say the good news is the state already has a fairly good framework to start this work, but these are the bills that the governor and sort of supporting legislators will move forward. There are, again, lots of others not on this list that we're just learning the details now as we look through the lists. So again, we're excited for the, I would say, enthusiasm and the momentum this legislative session on climate issues. Specifically though on funding, the governor did talk about in her December 1 climate discussion the interest in working with especially this committee and the legislature on advancing a bond proposal that invests in putting people back to work and infrastructure. And so I would say that the areas of climate overlap include transportation, wastewater and drinking water, as well as broadband investments. We see a tremendous opportunity and need for workforce training, especially at our CTEs and community colleges. You know, from electricians to efficiency contractors, there is a need and good paying jobs in this sector that aren't being filled because of a lack of a trained workforce. Really starting to do this work around municipal infrastructure support for adaptation. The federal government just started a new program for additional match for climate related adaptation projects. So how does the state make sure we're able to take advantage of those funds? One of the specific aspects of the plan is to double the rate of weatherization, especially for our seniors and low income Mainers. So investing more significantly in weatherization and efficiency for both homeowners and municipalities is part of the plan. I will also say the governor is supportive of additional funds for working in natural lands through programs like LMF, as well as innovation on the R&D side broadly, but especially as it relates to opportunities that we see in forest products and agriculture, as well as the fisheries sector. So I would just say last, I'm happy to talk in more detail, and I'm sure that this committee will receive additional briefings, but there is funding certainly already being spent on positive climate and energy activities through a variety of government programs. I would say right now the state has VW settlement dollars, as well as we are starting to get funding from the NCEC power line project. The settlement funds from that are specifically related to energy projects that are being used for rebates for electric vehicles, for heat pump installation, as well as efficiency projects. Efficiency Maine obviously has a robust program where their budget is approved by the Public Utilities Commission and goes through the EUT committee, but obviously significant investments already happening in Maine in efficiency. Maine Housing's programs support the weatherization work. And again, there are programs at DOT, DEP, DECD, DMR, and DACF that all are climate oriented. Are any of these enough to really fully realize the kind of work we need to do by 20 or 30 or 2050? No, I would say that that's going to be an ongoing conversation over the next 2 and 4 and 10 years. How do we really support this work, especially when it comes to infrastructure at the community level? There's a lot of need for greater capacity financing and lending. I will also say, though, that there is a lot of activity happening at the federal level around climate. The last Congress passed the STORM Act, a new climate adaptation fund, again coming through FEMA, that actually offers revolving loan funds to states that offer the match. We also just are now really getting the details on a couple of both the federal COVID and budget bills that have competitive broadband funds, energy innovation funds, tax credits, and new transportation funding. So I would say we see a lot of energy at the federal level for climate mitigation and adaptation activities. And we will certainly work with this committee and keep you posted as some of those bills come forward. There's definitely talk about the first 100 days of the new administration, the interest in passing a significant stimulus package to get the economy going again that helps to do some of this work. So again, I'll just say that the plan is online. We'll deliver you hard copies for when you're able to come back to your desks. But I am happy to answer any more questions on details. There's a lot in here, and I would say a lot more to come in the next couple of years. And again, I think if I'm only beginning to wrap my mind around a very long bills list, so how many of them end up back in this committee, we will certainly look forward to working with you on those. So I will stop there.
Had myself on mute. My apologies. Thank you so much, Director Pingree, for that great overview. I see that Senator Breen has her hand up, and then Representative Hymanson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you very much, Director Pingree, for this overview. I wanted to ask about the last, the federal act that passed in August that President Trump signed, the Great American Outdoors Act, I think is what it's called, and whether that existing legislation offers an opportunity for some federal input and that might require state match, or if you have anything you could say about that.
Yeah, that's a great question, and I should know more. I mean, I will say that act, I've asked Commissioner Beal, who I'm like, this seems like great news for Maine, and I think especially for our state parks and additional conservation activities. I mean, it's a significant long-term funding source for those things. I see Sarah's coming back to help save me here, but again, that act was really designed to help states with outdoor conservation programs as well as state infrastructure. So I know we are looking at that. I don't know if the rules have come out. So Sarah, I will turn it to you if that's okay with the chairs.
Absolutely. Director?
Yeah, so rules are currently being developed for that. We don't have the exact definition of what that program will look like, but we do know it'll be potentially an additional $3 million in federal funds each year for the state of Maine. And again, those are for acquisitions by municipalities and state government for community recreation, conservation kinds of projects. There is a component of that that is also linked to federal investments, so national parks, but we won't worry about that so much as we will focus on the state investment, stateside.
And do those require state match or municipal match? Or?
Yeah, the rules are still being, there's a lot of pressure among our partners to reduce that match on the state side so that the federal contribution could be more, potentially something like a 70% federal, 30% local match, or 60-40, not yet finalized, but we're hoping that particularly in this economy that will be considered.
And a lot of those funds come from oil drilling fees, right? They're not tax dollars per se, they're fees from the oil industry.
That's exactly right.
Forgive me if I missed it. When did you think those rules would be completed?
Well, with a changing administration, it's hard to say. I know some rules have been proposed and rejected, so folks at the federal level are thinking about it and working on it. I think probably there will be a lot of priorities for the new administration to focus on, but we're hopeful in the next 3 or 4 months to have some more guidance.
Thank you. Representative Hymanson.
Thanks. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for that overview. My question is about data collection. So there's a lot of moving parts here. Do you have dashboards that you're creating? And as an example, I thought of this about transportation. Now that people are working from home, they're not on the roads as much. Are you able to quantify that? And so about data collection, how are you handling that in all of these sectors?
Excellent question, Representative. I will say that we have a clear focus on the need for metrics and tracking of some of the key measures that we put out there as outcomes. There are 2025 and 2030 goals, and we want to be clear about how we're doing. The kind of ultimate metrics are the DEP emissions reporting, which comes out every 2 years. But I would say we are in the process of launching a dashboard that will include some of those metrics. And the climate plan sort of towards the end has a bulleted list of the kinds of things that we plan to track. So that absolutely on the list. I would say the equity subcommittee is specifically wrestling with, how do we make sure that we're meeting low income people? So we're setting additional metrics around that. So some things will be updated monthly, some things will be yearly, but we do look forward to coming back to the committee and reporting publicly on the Climate Council website on that ongoing tracking.
Thank you. I don't see anyone else with their hand up. I'll give one more opportunity for waving or raising hands. Don't see anything. Well, Director Pingree, thank you so much for being here. You've certainly accomplished. I guess Representative Hymanson got her hand up in the last second there of my countdown.
Yeah, sorry, the wheels are turning slower. So low income and people who are, how is that being tracked? People, tribal, people of color, low income, who are most vulnerable to these problems because they live in places that have been repurposed, that are often not clean, and so they suffer the most with health effects and all that stuff. So how is that being tracked?
Yeah, no, I think that is exactly what our new equity subcommittee is sort of planning to do. Ambassador Malian Dana is one of the co-chairs of that committee. We're actually just assembling the group right now. And I think we have some goals, like the number of low-income homes we want to weatherize, that we'll do through Maine Housing's LIHEAP program, for example, that will report, all right, this is how we're doing on really hitting low-income targets. I would say tracking it sort of by geography, race and gender, that, those kinds of things will be something the equity committee will grapple with. I think the focus of that group is to make sure that implementation is broad, and there is both communication and programs that are accessible and that are working for different groups. So the idea of the committee is that they meet, help us set some benchmarks, we report on them, but then we regularly see how we're doing. So I would say it's a good subject that we'd be happy to continue to report back to you on, and happy to take feedback about specific metrics and programs you want to see. I mean, I will say, like, Efficiency Maine, for example, just rolled out a new rebate program specifically for low income EVs, as well as used cars. And how that works, I think we're going to be tracking that. And if it doesn't work, how do we retool that program over time to make it work better? So I would say there's a strong interest in this. A lot of the jobs and training work is going to be geared towards really how do we make sure that those folks who are seeking employment, especially in areas of Maine that have high unemployment rates, have access to both the training and then these new jobs that we know are good paying jobs. So there's kind of a lot of components that we want to track, but obviously we're trying to pick a few metrics that are really high level. The governor did set a goal to double the number of clean energy and efficiency jobs in the next 10 years. So tracking that and then breaking that down by regions, geographies, other metrics, I think could also be helpful reporting.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other last shot at raising your hand? Questions, thoughts? Well, thank you.
Can I just say thank you to this committee? It's good to see you all, some members who I once served on this committee with, at least for a short period of time, and we are grateful. The legislature did give us a 2-year appropriations to help do the work of the Climate Council, and I think despite these wild times, we did push on, and we were able to really bring a broad variety of Mainers together and the right data. So I just want to thank you for your support, and we again look forward to working with you on now how to do all of these things. So thank you.
Thank you. We look forward to that as well. I'm sure that if we ever needed you to come back, or members of your staff, we could invite you back in to answer further questions. So thanks.
Anytime. Thank you.
Thank you. So as you can tell from today, that these were standalone events, but they have some synergy and some overlapping in a lot of different ways. So we're glad to have invited the state treasurer and the director of Land for Maine's Future and the director of the governor's office of policy information in the future for today's briefing. That concludes our regularly scheduled program for today. I did want to say that next Tuesday, we had hoped to get in the HHS department and have a briefing for them. They have some in-house orientation going on, so we're still in process to pull that together. So we will not have a meeting on Tuesday, the 19th. There will be no meeting on Tuesday, the 19th. So our next meeting will be on Thursday, the 21st at 1 p.m., same Zoom time, same place, and look forward to seeing everyone there. Are there any questions by the committee or anything before I adjourn the meeting? Yes, Analyst Dawson.
I just wanted to also say thank you for everybody's responsiveness when I pulled for a possibility of Wednesday. And that is also not going to be able to happen. So, but I do appreciate how quickly, this is the fastest committee on getting back to me on polling I've ever had. So thank you all.
Excellent. Set that bar high. I like that. So thank you.
Madam Chair, before you adjourn, I just want to remind folks that the schedule for the public hearings for the supplemental has come out. We'll be starting at 10 o'clock on Monday, the 25th. And if you have any questions, or Maureen do you have anything you want to say about that, Maureen?
Yes, the ad in the paper will be going out this weekend. I have not sent out the detail, but you'll get that hopefully within the next couple days of a very detailed hearing that tells you which committees and what programs they'll be hearing. So watch for that. It'll be very exciting.
And as a reminder, we invite the policy committees in to join us for those, in addition to the DAS commissioner. So
the plan is now Monday through Thursday of that week, probably starting at 10 every day, and probably not, since it's a supplemental, I don't think will need all day, but you know, it never hurts to have the time blocked off.
We will, for a couple of those days, though, have a morning and afternoon for different committees that need to come in. So you'll see that on the schedule. I think that's for mainly Wednesday and Thursday. So look in your inbox. That will be arriving soon. Great. Well, thank you, everyone. I hope everyone has a nice weekend. And with that, I'll adjourn the meeting.
Nice job.